We have partnered for a long time with Hitachi Vantara, and they have been doing some fantastic stuff in terms of getting the AI infrastructure right? A lot of times it's very easy to talk about models, applications, but a lot of the core work needs to be done on the infrastructure end.
Cloud is a good start. We see customers leveraging cloud to do a small POC or a proof of value because it's easy to adopt.
The reality is that when they go down that path and they start to scale, they start to think about the responsibility.
Customers realize that always going on the cloud is not or may not be the right choice. There are customers who are very sensitive about the response they get, a latency they have from network.
So what works best is a hybrid approach.
When I first moved to Singapore as an Australian guy, that is something that the US will never come across.
What would you tell a CTO who's 100% on cloud today? Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of AI Adventures at Fluid AI. This is a very interesting podcast that I get to host today with two very interesting people. We have partnered for a long time with Hitachi Vantara, and they have been doing some fantastic stuff in terms of getting the AI infrastructure right? A lot of times it's very easy to talk about models, applications, but a lot of the core work needs to be done on the infrastructure end. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Matthew Hardman and Amit Deshmukh from Hitachi Vantara. And let's have a very interesting discussion today. Welcome, Matthew. Welcome, Amit. Pleasure to have you today.
Hey, Raghav. Thank you so much. Excited to be part of this podcast and looking forward to have good, meaningful conversations with you and Matt.
Perfect. So Matthew Hardman is the CTO Asia Pac for Hitachi Vantara, and Amit Deshmukh is the business and solutions leader for Hitachi Vantara. So Matthew, Amit, my first question to you has been is that a lot of times when we talk about AI, and especially Agentic AI and GenAI, the focus goes on the cloud, right? Everyone thinks that it needs to be done on the cloud. In your practical implementations with Hitachi, have you seen similar perspectives, or is there something different emerging?
That's a great question, Raghav. Many times, cloud is a good start. We see customers leveraging cloud to do a small POC or a proof of value because it's easy to adopt, easy to power on and power off resources. But when it comes to productizing AI, the costs involved in productizing AI and running AI 24/7, and when we put that TCO calculation on paper for next 3 to 5 years, customers realize that always going on the cloud is not or may not be the right choice. So we see customers being more and more hybrid. I'll give an example and then let Matt add on to it. There are customers who are very sensitive about their data. There are customers who are very sensitive about the response they get, a latency they have from network. At the same time, they want to have an independent system running at a location which may not have access to cloud or network. In such cases, having everything on cloud can be prohibitive. So we're seeing hybrid model suits very well for customers who want to blend both the flexibility of cloud and the economics of on-prem infrastructure. So I think there's no right or wrong answer, but hybrid is the right choice with the mix of on-prem and cloud to solve right challenges and to serve the business in the right fashion is what most of our customers are adopting today. Matt, you want to say something on this?
Yeah, so just a quick one. The conversation about hybrid cloud, I think, is super interesting, right? What I see with many customers early on is that they want to jump into a proof of concept or a proof of value around AI, and cloud presents an opportunity for them to do it very, very quickly, right? I mean, cloud is really about spinning up resources quickly to be able to go ahead and actually show something. The reality is that when they go down that path and they start to scale, they start to think about the responsibility. is their cloud environment set up to have that same level of rigor and data resiliency and data protection and insights that the on-premise actually has, right? And Amit sort of talked about it, right? Privacy, regulation, all those different things. The big thing that I constantly have to remind people, or not say like remind like I know it better than anybody else, but we have discussions on utilizing cloud resources doesn't necessarily absolve you of the responsibility of understanding everything that goes on with the cloud environments. If I take, for example, Hong Kong. Hong Kong has now introduced the Critical Infrastructure Operations Act, which is really about ensuring that industries that are critical to the country, healthcare, financial, power, all those different ones, they need to have rigorous plans in place and processes to be able to handle what happens when something goes down. Now, you might know how that works on premise, but do you know how that works in the cloud? Like, how deeply do you understand the remediation, the resiliency capabilities of the cloud? You can buy into features, but what happens if the data center goes down? What happens if they can't get access to resources? I mean, we have seen in the past, Singapore is a great example for this, where the government actually said to the hyperscalers, hey, you can't increase capacity in your data centers because we want to do a check on the environmental impact. Now, when that happened, customers were actually impacted. They couldn't actually start their applications because they were all told that, hey, you should build applications to be on demand and just scale as resources were needed. But when they oversold the capacity and they couldn't grow, all of a sudden, many customers woke up suddenly realizing they couldn't service their customers, and that became a risk. So as organizations start to really think about these sorts of applications built around AI, and we already know that they can actually require a lot of resources, a lot of power, all those different things, companies are going to have to start thinking about what am I going to do to distribute the actual application between on-prem and in the cloud. Maybe I start in the cloud, but as soon as I get to some aspect of threshold or some aspect of I need to accelerate, I need to then start to realize when do I start to move this to on-premise, because that is what they need to start being concerned about. They need to start thinking about regulation, start thinking about privacy, start thinking about cost. Those are important factors when it comes to balancing between cloud and on-premise.
No, I think both Amit and Matthew, I think what you're talking about makes a lot of sense here. You're saying there's this triangle, right, of cost, of regulation, of privacy, that typically, when you go on the cloud, you sort of need to evaluate where you rest on that framework. So what works best is a hybrid approach. But how does someone, and a lot of orgs have done this already, right? There was a lot of GenAI hype over the last 2 years. They've already gone on the cloud. How do they now get an element of on-prem in, right? Because now they're sort of architected in a certain way. They didn't realize those risks up front, but now they're sort of having to, assume them, and they want to sort of de-risk themselves again. So what would you tell a CTO who's 100% on cloud today and says, hey, I understand these risks today, but I need to move further?
I think that's one of the most complex activities coming back on-prem. I mean, even before GenAI, when customers started adopting cloud and they realized they can't continue running on cloud because the scale and the costs are really stopping their aspirations. They wanted to come on-prem, and coming back on-prem was a big challenge because cloud works in certain way, and there are certain standards that they are built on, and there are certain services they are using it. And on-prem, you have different architectures, different implementations, different protocols, and different services. And that means doing everything from scratch, and that could be a biggest challenge. And that's why when we look at AI today, or GenAI, agentic AI today, if we leverage similar standards and protocols and architectures, for example, building solutions based on same MCP based architecture, can be easier for a customer, so that a solution can be adopted on-prem or can be in the cloud or can be moved in and out as required, because they're built on similar concepts and similar protocols, and they're built on same MCP standards. At the same time, when it comes to uh, the data platform, having a data platform that can scale out to the cloud and scale in on-prem by leveraging same protocols like S3. S3 has become a universal protocol for talking today, for accessing data. So what if we have same S3 storage on-prem and in the cloud? What if we have similar implementations on-prem and in the cloud today? What if we can mix and match these things in an architecture that is a floating, which means a part of my architecture can be in the cloud and remaining can be on-prem, and you can move in and out easily. So thinking from that ground and building something that is more universal and not tailor made to a specific implementation or a protocol or specific technology can solve this problem. It can become a universal implementation, and moving in and out can be easier in such environments.
Yeah, I think if I add to that, I would sort of say it's interesting, right? Because I think about from my days as a software developer, right, building enterprise systems and things like that, and where they were like Oracle onto it was like 3-tier application, business tier, database, client, right? I would really be very, very nervous about trying to move that application today. I think today technologies are getting better. It's certainly, I agree with Amit, like it's not easy. Like you don't go in there and sort of say, well, it's easy to go ahead and actually move around. You've got to start with standards, right? I mean, if you're going to go ahead and actually build something and you want that level of flexibility, you got to think about standards. And like there's some popular technology stacks that people are utilizing today, and if you can sort of stick to those verified and certified stacks, that's going to help you with some aspect of portability from cloud onto on-premise, right? And we see those sorts of stacks happening. OpenShift, OpenStack, those are very, very popular stacks that people are going ahead and actually utilizing. The other thing I would sort of say as well, it's kind of interesting. We quite often sort of talk about it as if it's a cloud to on-prem or on-prem to cloud, but we also need to think about cloud to cloud, right? There will be some organizations where what they will do is they will sort of pursue the gold in the cloud, what they offer, right? So if I looked at AI innovations today, right, and if I look at it from a consumer perspective, right, I mean, Amit spends much more time going deeper on this one. But if I were to sort of say to you, who would be the leader in terms of consumer-based AI, you might have said, well, Microsoft was a big one with Copilot a while ago, right? But now you look at what Gemini is actually, Google's doing with Gemini. I think Gemini is actually very, very exciting. I use Gemini quite often, not for work, obviously, but for consumer stuff. And so, there are a lot of people who are saying the work that Google's actually doing is really, really innovative in terms of Gen I. And so when customers start to look for value and results that they can actually drive, they might also be looking at that portability between cloud. How can I move my application, my data to a different cloud, because they might have a particular service. And all of these hyperscalers will be thinking about creating offering different differentiations that will say, come and consume my resources. Now, that doesn't absolve them of what we talked about earlier, the data security, the regulation, all those different things.
Understanding the nooks and crannies, yeah.
Exactly, right? Like you still have that responsibility, but I sort of have this feeling that we need to, it's not going to be this cloud amorphous, it's cloud to cloud to cloud to hyperscale to on-premise. Maybe it's even to shared location, like it's like an Equinix. Those sorts of environments as well, where it's a hosted environment, but you control it. So customers will have to think about, how do I use standardized frameworks to help me go ahead and get the value of what I'm doing? How do I have great data portability? Because that's going to be important. And then how do I have a set of security and regulations that move with me? Like, how much of that can I actually rely upon? So those are things that need to be considered. And it's not easy, but it's better today. Better than it used to be, that's for sure.
Hitting upon one of those points, right, wherein you said that it can be even multi-cloud, right? And you talked about how Gemini has now become a very powerful model. I guess in all of this, the evaluations become really important, right? Let's say you've launched an agentic model, you've launched an agentic flow, which is consuming, let's say, OpenAI or Cloud, and today you say, hey, everyone's talking about Gemini. I want to switch my model to Gemini. But how do I ensure it's great for the consumer, right? For him, it's just for him or her, she just spins up Gemini and she does what she wants to. But in an enterprise setting where there's, you want to prove veracity, validity, you want to ensure everything is, running A-OK before shipping models. I guess the evaluations become really, really important, right? When you want to be so flexible in your architecture.
And I think this is a big part of what people need to do. I think there's the evaluation, but it's also making sure you're very clear on the starting point. Like being able to sort of define, why am I going on this journey in the first place, right? This is probably, I wouldn't say the first time. I would say it's the second time this has sort of happened in enterprise IT history, right? The first time where I've seen people sort of jump into something because it was a piece of technology was basically cloud, right? What was really interesting is you saw that the marketing aspects of a lot of the organizations, your Microsofts, your Googles, your Amazons, they are absolute big marketing powerhouses. Let's be honest, right? I mean, I've had the opportunity to work for them. They're fantastic companies to experience some things, and they have lots of budget that they'll go ahead and actually drive people. And what they will do is they'll go to market and they'll sort of say, like, we offer the most innovative technology. And if you don't use that technology, well, you're lagging behind. Or they'll take the people who do adopt that technology and highlight them as visionaries, right? Which is great for the IT industry to sort of say, here's people who are changing the way. But what that does sometimes as well is it inadvertently makes people think, well, I just have to be in there. And they don't necessarily evaluate. They don't understand, okay, what is the problem I'm trying to go ahead and actually solve? Or what is the outcome I'm trying to realize? What is the risk going to be for my organization? What's the cost going to be for my organization? And so, you saw in the industry people talking about grey IT. They talked about escalating cloud costs. They talked about security risk because they jumped into it because they just wanted to be in the technology. The concern is this is the second wave we're seeing again now with AI, right? The AI has a lot of promised value and outcome. And we do see lots of implementations where AI does provide some aspect of value. But I think on the whole, most of the time, you see the ones that really add value or have success is because they really knew what they were going out to solve. And once they really understood what they were going to solve, then they could do a proper assessment. What is the risk to the organization? What's the data we're going to use? How do we actually utilize it? Those organizations who just kind of jumped in and just started feeding in data without really having an outcome maybe didn't see true value, or maybe didn't actually sort of think about the ramifications. So you're right when you say the aspect of assessment right now needs to be a priority gate when it comes down to AI. Like you should have focus areas in your assessment. Is it around cost? Is it around security? Is it around data privacy? It's not, none of these things are optional. You're going to have to make sure each of these different things are baked into your assessment before you wholly jump into it, right? If you're going to go in and do a proof of value or a proof of concept, you want to make real sure that the data you're utilizing has been cleansed, has been anonymized. Like, you don't want that risk going up there. But certainly when you go into production, all that assessment should have been done before you even started the POC or the POV, because you don't want to go so far down the line and suddenly jump in and say, oh my God, it's fantastic, and then have all these problems later on. So you're right. Assessment and evaluation is absolutely key to your success in AI.
Looking at it from another lens, right? And this is like, as a provider, when Fluid goes out and when we talk, a lot of people say, I don't have a budget, right? I don't have a number, but I know AI has a lot of value. So the quickest way to do it is a small POC, and then we grow that. But then, and what we're talking about right now, a lot of it is like, hey, you should have a complete plan going very deep, right? And because later on there are cost implications, there are regulatory implications, there are privacy implications. How do we sort of, really manage this conundrum that a CTO or a CIO faces, right? Because if he does go down the journey of being extremely planned and budget conscious, he needs to make it a capex decision, right? He needs to go to his data center team and say, okay, we're going to spend on storage, we're going to spend on GPUs, and this is the kind of outcome I see. But really, he doesn't know the core benefits, right? Because he or she is still sort of figuring out how AI impacts the organization. If he goes down the other route where he spins up something on the cloud, he or she then sort of starts experimenting. It's great in the beginning because numbers are very manageable, but then as soon as it's giving a lot of value, the sticker shock hits, right? There's a bill that comes which was not expected, not budgeted for, and there are all sorts of questions going around. So How do organizations do this? Avoiding slowing down completely, but still planning well. And how has Hitachi seen this happen?
I think planning plays a big role, but more than that, many times we don't have all the time in this world to do a very exhaustive planning, because we are in this world where we want quick and dirty outcomes as soon as possible. So I think the practical approach would be start with something that is critical but at the same time can show value. So I think starting small uh, can be the easiest thing. So find out one workflow that an agentic AI can automate. Find out what would be the KPIs for that workflow to automate and what it can deliver. Then find out, do we have a clean copy of data that we can feed into this workflow so that it can either automate or do something that otherwise is manual for me. Then maybe even before productizing it, have some kind of human in the loop, or some kind of human intervention to evaluate the responses that this AI agent is generating or automating. And now you have a working prototype about how things were happening in the past and how an AI agent that you have tried tested can deliver it. And now, and that becomes your validation to your CFO or CIO to go and seek additional budgets. And then maybe you can also, generally we have seen customers doing this, create a roadmap around how my single agent can be a multi-agent system to automate a complex workflow. So I think generally I would suggest this way to some of my customers, because this is exactly what I was dealing with a customer a few weeks back. They presented about 5 to 6 different use cases that they wanted the AI can do for them. I said, can we take a step back and identify what is the first thing we can do instead of trying to solve everything? Because yes, AI can do everything, but it can be a big turnkey projects which might fail if not executed properly. So why don't we take a step back and identify one or two workflows that we can start with? Again, evaluate right models. Can we identify right large language models for these use cases? Can we use a pre-trained model instead of a RAG based use case? Because a pre-trained model trained on certain data sets and just with prompts we can achieve a lot than trying to create something which needs a little bit more customization and then go to more complex use cases. And that's what I think is required in such environments. So these are the considerations I would suggest.
Actually, I'm going to add to on top of that one as well. Like, they're beyond the technical conversation. I think we need to also look at it and sort of say, who is the AI actually for? Right. So let me sort of put something forward there. Like, when we think about eh, this sounds really weird, but go with me on this one. I'm a very abstract kind of thinker. When we think about rolling out antivirus to everybody's laptop, right? That's an IT responsibility, right? That's they are doing that because what their intention is from an organizational point of view, they need to provide some aspect of security. Now, when you think about AI, right, or an AI solution, and you're saying, I need to go ahead and actually drive some aspect of business outcome, right? So let's say, for example, the sales department in the organization says, I want an AI solution to be able to help me drive more sales. Who's benefiting from that? The sales department, right? So they've asked for this solution to be able to help them be successful. So your question, Raghav, before was really like, what about these escalating costs? I think you've got to make sure that within the organization, you have the right partnerships with the business units that want the AI, right? So it's not well, IT said we should do this. It's an IT problem. It's the business problem with the business department that actually wanted that, right? So they should have a shared investment in the cost in terms of what's actually going on. Now, yeah, you might go ahead and quickly jump onto the cloud and then suddenly have the sticker shock. But if there isn't the ownership from the business department that actually wants it in the first place, you're solely going to be responsible for it. If you can actually have a conversation and identify that partnership with that business unit and say, look, we want to go ahead and actually do this. And coming back to your assessment, if we did this in the cloud, this is what we potentially see it's going to cost over 5 years. If we do this on-prem, this is what we can actually think we're going to do from a 5-year cost point of view. Where do you want to actually invest, right? Because it has to be a shared accountability. So I think if you jump off and run off into trying to actually build something without really having the right business partner in place to, share responsibility, share outcomes, share goals, you might find yourself overspending and being the single person actually standing in front of the CFO and saying, I need your help to pay this bill, right? You want to make sure, and again, it comes back to, I keep circling back, it comes back to the starting point. What is the goal you're trying to achieve? What's the outcome you're trying to achieve? And who is the business partner you're going to work with to share the investment, share the responsibility, share the execution? You've got to make sure that if you're looking for success in these AI workloads or AI services that are driving a business value, who is your business partner that's going to go ahead and actually work with you on it?
So Matthew, what you're saying is the foundation is the partnership, right? In terms of you go beyond it being a point solution to saying, let's look at it from a business angle and say, how do we partner together on it? And then this becomes a very different philosophical discussion, right? Obviously, planning and all of the tactical stuff happens, but that's the philosophy you sort of enter with. And Amit, what I'm hearing from you is it doesn't necessarily need to be big bang, right? It can be small, and it can evolve within that partnership framework into something very large, very exciting. But as a vendor, also you're saying you're happy to tell customers scale back in the beginning and then grow rather than go big bang in the start and then have challenges with cost, with privacy, with security, those kind of things.
So I jump in on this one. But one of the other things I think is really important as well is that organizations and business units also need to assess their legacy applications and solutions. Like if you're stepping ahead with something, when are you retiring the older stuff? Right. I think many organizations tend to keep moving ahead, but they're not necessarily saying, okay, well, if we go down that path, what are we retiring on the back end? Right. So we keep talking about IT costs. I think legacy applications also present security risks and aging data stores and things like that. As we start to move forward, if people are really trying to reduce costs, you can't just keep looking at the new stuff to try and reduce the cost, but you've got to look at the older stuff and say, what am I retiring? What's my technical debt? Right? Because if I understand what I use and operate today, do I still actually need that? And can I start to find some cost savings there? I would sort of say the number of applications that a business department is probably licensed for and either don't use or maybe one or two people actually use is probably massive. And if you really sat down and did that proper inventory of applications and systems, you'd probably find some cost savings in those environments. You can go ahead and actually start to commit to the modern applications as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Matthew. I think a lot of times when we look at agentics and Gen AI, that part of the puzzle, right? What can we retire because this has now come in? That kind of benefit is not estimated or not even foreseen, right? Folks just it's forgotten or it's sort of hidden away. But there's a massive risk as well that organizations carry when they move ahead with these outdated legacy applications, both security, cost, maintenance. The people who can maintain it, that's an ever shrinking number. So yes, I think that's something that a lot of us need to look at as well. And as IT vendors, as providers of solutions, I think that's something we need to educate our customers and spend some time sort of helping them understand that. Moving on, Matthew, Amit, the one point that I had was you're interacting with a lot of customers, especially in the APAC region. Are we seeing anything different in APAC compared to maybe other regions when it comes to AI adoption, when it comes to AI infrastructure, or anything that APAC needs to do a little differently, because of maybe business scenarios, because of environmental scenarios? Are you seeing changes, or is it largely still the global standard that's sort of coming out here as well?
I think one thing I'm seeing is in APAC, we are adopting the newer technology much faster than global peers. First thing is we are made up of so many small regions and countries that there is a need to constantly tailor-made our experience to our customers. As an example, in APAC, there are so many countries that speak different languages, and each country has a different need. So even the simple thing like tailoring a large language model and creating a SLM to cater to that specific language or that specific use case or that specific industry is something that is happening a lot here. When you take example of India, so many languages being spoken, so taking a model that is trained on English and retraining on a local language can be something that we need to look at. That's not something happening globally. So take example of Americas as a country. Having just English language based large language model can address almost all the use cases. Same thing doesn't happen over here. Here in APAC, we have Chinese, we have Malay, we have Vietnam, Indonesian language, Indian languages, and everything has to be custom made. So many times I'm seeing that change more, and that is where the tailoring to our audience is more different, apart from adopting these standard global imperatives. So I think it's more custom, more tailor made. And again, we know that a lot of countries that have limitations in acquiring these resources from large manufacturers. So how do we navigate around these challenges? And that's where what we started today, going hybrid can be a good choice, because sometimes having access to resources is not available immediately. So what I have seen customers doing is going on the cloud, acquiring some resources while working with infrastructure players like us to acquire these resources. And that's a smart move, because if I want to start my AI journey today and I'm being constrained by availability of infrastructure resources because I'm part of the country which has so many restrictions and limitations to acquire these resources, I can go to cloud today, start my prototype, evaluate this, be ready, and start acquiring this infrastructure with players like us, because we know how to get it for the customer in the next 6 months. But maybe what we can do for the next for these 6 months is start their journey in a way where we can prepare them. And that's a change I'm seeing most of our customers doing, because they don't have access to everything from day one. So these are some things that I see differently happening in the region like APAC, India, compared to global markets.
Yeah, I think if I were to add to that, I think what's really interesting, and it plays on something you were saying, we have a lot of smaller markets, and so if you look at, people might say ASEAN. ASEAN is not a country. ASEAN is a unification of different countries with different regulations and different geographical boundaries. If you sort of look at, like, if we pick on hyperscalers again, cloud and resources available, America is so big. And to your point, it's a consistent set of languages. And so if I have data in this data center, I need to fail over to the other data center, it's still in America, right? But when I start looking at the deployment of that infrastructure across Asian markets, we have smaller markets. So where does Malaysia fail over to? Is it to Singapore? Is it to Australia or Jakarta? Like, but you don't necessarily have the infrastructure set up to be able to support it all at the same scale that you would actually probably see in somewhere like the US or maybe a Germany or some of those bigger markets. So I think realizing that infrastructure availability is a little bit more challenging in some of these markets. I think there's some great innovations happening though. Like, if you talk about some of the things happening in Singapore around AI, I get really excited, right? And this maybe doesn't really sound so much like an AI specific problem, but data center cooling, right? Singapore as a market has a really bizarre situation. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm full of stories, right? But when I first moved to Singapore as an Australian guy, and I walked around the office, I was working for Microsoft at the time, I was completely spun out by the fact that people had sweaters and jackets on the back of their chairs. And I'm thinking, we live in Singapore. This is a tropical environment. When would you need to have a sweater? Now, I actually used to be a very big man, so it doesn't matter what temperature was, I was always fairly warm, right? But I lost a lot of weight. And recently here, what I've noticed is that when a big storm comes over, our HVAC systems, our air conditioners, drop the temperature down for some reason. I'm not sure if it's because it's a swing in humidity or things like that, but the automated air conditioning systems don't necessarily know what's going on, and they drop the temperature down. And so people put the jackets on. Now, take this same story to a data center, which runs at fairly high temperatures. Now, because we have such dramatic weather changes in our country, how does the temperatures in the data center actually fluctuate and change, right? And I know we've got organizations who are actually now working on cooling systems in data centers that can utilize AI to predict incoming storms and change the temperature accordingly on demand. So if a storm's coming in and the outside temperature is going to drop for 2 or 3 degrees for the next sort of 2 or 3 hours, it can actually sort of change the temperature and the cooling and do that on demand. Like, that is something that the US will never come across, right? Their temperatures are probably a little bit more consistent, but from a tropical environment, storms and things like that are kind of crazy. The second thing that happens in our markets is, like, we also have heavily constrained resources that can help power these data centers. So we're seeing much more innovative usage of electricity generation, electricity consumption. When you live in a constrained environment, you really do have to think outside the box. And that's what I see happening here in APAC more than any other country, right? So I think, the technologies that power these data centers, that will power AI, is unique and innovative as compared to anywhere else in the world. The second thing which I thought was really interesting, and this is a bit older, when you talk about AI and what's happening in Asia Pacific, I'll challenge you on this one. Do you know of a thing called DeepSeek, Amit? Right? DeepSeek. I think DeepSeek is really, really interesting. And when I was in Korea, I was talking to some of our team over there, and someone said to me, his name is John Yu, the country manager of Korea. He said, I am really excited about DeepSeek. And I was really confused. And I sort of thought, why would somebody from Korea be really excited about a Chinese-based AI? And he said, I'm not excited so much about DeepSeek itself, but I'm excited that we've seen the development of an AI model outside of the US. And what this has shown us is that every country has an opportunity to compete on a global stage in terms of building out AI models. We're not beholden to a ChatGPT, OpenAI, same thing, but we're not beholden to the Western software developers and AI developers. We can actually go and build this stuff ourselves. Now, say what you will about DeepSeek. People are kind of very polar about the situation. I know some people love it, some people question it, but that inspired organizations and countries around the world to say, we can develop our own AI models. And I think this is pertinent to what Amit was sort of talking about. When we have lots of different languages, countries can lead the way within their markets to build out these AI general models that can actually help them and many of the smaller organizations out there. Certainly, large enterprises may want to build their own models, but they probably want a starting point. And having a starting point in, say, India, if you're an India company, probably makes a lot more sense than having an American-based model. So those, I think some of those innovations, the innovations around data center, understanding our climate and weather, I think is very, very unique. And I think the incorporation of language and the different models that can be developed is really exciting about what's happening here as well in APAC.
No, definitely. I think Matthew, Amit, great points, right? So it's about we have a very diverse audience in, like you said, like India itself, being based here is not one specific economy, right? It's 20, 25 different economies. And then ASEAN, obviously, very diverse as well. Then there's the whole language aspect, wherein we're seeing diversity of languages, which sometimes require very different models, right? Especially when you're customer facing. The models need to understand not just language, but culture, a little bit about lingo or linguistic stuff. So it's quite deep. You can't just slap a global model and say, let's go with that. And then finally, it comes to those nuances, right? Whether it be about energy, weather, climate, or regulation, all of these come together. So definitely, I think, and DeepSeek was really interesting, right? I think when you saw it as a model come out, it was one of the first models which challenged, some of the American models out there. And being open source, it sort of offers, companies a different way of sort of looking at AI and even getting those models on-prem if required, right? If they're comfortable with the Chinese model on-prem. So I think Asia definitely leading the way in some regards and offering a very different kind of set of economic characteristics. Coming now to something more specific to Hitachi Vantara, you've been partnering with companies such as us, like Fluid, to sort of offer customers AI infrastructure. Obviously, you guys are leaders globally, but on top of that, sort of go beyond just the infrastructure, right? To give a more solution-based approach, wherein someone like a Fluid comes in and says, "Hey, we can provide agentic flows, agentic models, MCPs," and then you have your infrastructure. How are you seeing these partnerships evolve, and how are customers sort of looking at these partnerships when you sort of go to them with a more comprehensive approach?
I think the key part of partnerships is helping customers find value quickly. Right now, again, I'm going to circle back to a whole range of different things that you spoke about before, about regulation, assessments, evaluations, and all those different things. You know, organizations want to work with partnerships because they can help them to navigate some of these waters that they don't understand, right? You can work directly with a technology vendor, but that's not solving the actual problem. You can buy servers, no problems at all. I can go ahead and actually buy storage, no problems at all. But at some point, I've got to bring them together, right? Now, that's just the technical integration. But what about then the business integration? What things can I go ahead and actually use to solve value problems? And quite often, even in all of the conversations I had with customers, especially with the introduction of new technology, customers will ask, well, who else has done this? And so what they're looking for is experience from people who have done it before, who understand the challenges, who understand the potential pitfalls and can help them navigate it. Because what the customers want to do at the end of the day, they want outcomes, but through the pursuit of those outcomes, they want to minimize risk. They want to get there efficiently. They want to get there safely. They want to minimize the risk. And so the importance of the partnership, especially between Fluid and Hitachi Vantara, is how do we ensure we can deliver a robust, scalable, performant platform to actually run AI, but then at the same time, how do you quickly navigate the journey towards the value? You can't do that without technology alone. That requires the expertise of an organization like Fluid AI to say, okay, here's your business problem that we've identified. Here's the outcomes we think we can actually achieve for you. And here's the platform we're going to go ahead and actually bring together. Now, understanding your challenges around security and regulation, we can help you navigate that as well, from infrastructure to solution. And so those partnerships are absolutely critical. And I don't think we can help customers have success unless we bring the partnership together. Otherwise, it's just a tech sale and it introduces risk. And that's something that I want to avoid for our customers.
Yeah, maybe just a few more things apart from what Matt said. And it's kind of summarizing the way Matt explained also. Fluid can bring the innovation around agentic AI and automation and solve the business problems. But when it comes to infrastructure and data, we can value add, we can complement, because we know how to provide right data platform, what infrastructure is required, and how do we provide responsible AI and reliable and secure infrastructure to access AI. So I think this a combination of having capabilities to solve business problems by automating and leveraging AI and deploying it on a infrastructure that is secure, scalable, and hybrid in nature can be a good combination for our customers. And we're already seeing that happening with the kind of use cases we can deliver today. So I think I would say it's a best of the breed partnership with two differently skilled, capable companies and partners together to solve business problems and use AI to solve something that otherwise is not possible.
And so, Matt, Amit, I know we are almost at the end, but it was a very engaging discussion. I have one last question for both of you: is can you give me, a scenario or an instance? You've obviously experienced a lot of customers start their AI journeys. In fact, go quite deep into them, wherein there was a strategic decision that a customer took right, according to you, which really enabled them to get a lot of value out of AI, or maybe if not a decision, an action point that they did, or something key that they did that made their AI journey much more valuable than if it were not for that decision or action.
Let me apply it in a little different way. Uh, Not specific. This example is more from traditional AI, but
Okay.
very, very valid example and very realistic example. Today, the vision LLMs and vision models have reached the stage where it can leverage AI and the computer vision to to inspect and to detect faults and predict the failures in real time. In the past, we used to feed the data from our supply chain to a model that will say where are the faults, but by the time the product is already out and shipped and delivered to a customer. So how uh, a real time fraud detection and AI can and analytics as well. Traditional analytics, real time analysis, and the power of AI can come together to detect the faults in real time, even when the product is on the supply product is being manufactured and not yet delivered to the customer, can create that wow factor. So for some of our customers, where this is a manufacturing example where this customer has adopted all this what I have spoken to create more realistic prediction around whether this particular part should be productized and shipped to the customer or should be taken out from assembly line even before reaching to the customer, so that customer doesn't have that customer have a wow experience wherein even before shipping out I know that this can fail, so let me pull it back and ship a right product to the customer. And this has increased the customer satisfaction for this manufacturer, increase their uh, profitability and reduce their faults because they don't have to recall the parts back. And we know how many times it happens after a car is manufactured. After
It's
6 months
getting
down the
recalled.
line, they know that a particular part needs to be replaced. An entire batch of thousands of cars have been recalled. What if this can be uh,
Real time.
this yeah, this can be done much earlier in time just by analyzing the things and leveraging power of AI, power of computer vision, power of vision LLMs, power of analytics, and historical data in by analyzing all that. So we have done this for customers in large manufacturing companies across the world, and we are able to replicate that across different verticals as well, not just one. So I think this is something I can share.
That's a really good example. I know exactly who you're talking about that one. It's a very powerful application of AI. I think when it comes down to sort of making the right decisions about the implementation of AI, I'm going to sort of come at it from a bit of a different angle, right? Not necessarily from an enterprise point of view, but from what I've seen talking to different people of various size organizations. AI is fantastic to help achieving an outcome, but you've got to remember who is going to be utilizing the AI or who will actually interact with the AI at the end of the day. And I've seen some companies who have sort of driven everything towards AI, right, in terms of their customer interaction and things like that. I've seen some organizations take a more cautious approach, and it wasn't necessarily because they didn't believe in AI, but they were concerned about the customer experience at the end of the day, right? And what they wanted to ensure was that AI was something that can actually empower them and empower their people to be more successful with their customers versus replacing their people to interface with the customer, right? I will tell you that there's nothing more infuriating than picking up a phone and trying to call an organization and trying to navigate through a dial one for this, dial two for this, dial. Like, I don't know how
Yeah.
many times I've done it. 0000000 just to try and make the system fail so they get me to somebody.
Somebody.
AI has that same risk, right? I mean, you don't want to disenfranchise your customers. So I think customers that I've spoken to who are taking a measured approach where they're saying, okay, our AI doesn't necessarily replace our customer interactions, right? They empower our customer interactions. That's where I see the differentiating factor will be for many organizations. Certainly, there's some applications like the one Amit just spoke about. Is you can't get a human to do what they do today. Like they just can't physically look at the manufacturing line at high speed and say there's something wrong with that. Like you don't want your customer down the line, 2 months say there's something wrong with my product. And these days everybody's interconnected. They're going to say this product's rubbish, and they're going to say it's online and it's bad for your brand. So you need those sorts of automated AI applications to be able to mitigate your risk and reduce errors and manufacturing faults. But when it comes to actually interacting with users, you should not be using AI to replace it if it's going to impact your customer experience. That is the biggest risk, I think, for a lot of organizations. So I think organizations who are balancing it will be the ones that will ultimately be successful with AI, because it's about empowering people, not about replacing the customer engagement.
Perfect. No, I think two very interesting points and on very different sides of the business. I think, Amit, what you've talked about is the real-timeness of AI, right? And then connecting those disparate data sources, right? Whether it be training sets and records or other kinds of imaging, and then really making it a real-time experience rather than something that's, which can be solved on the shop floor itself rather than when it's already shipped, right? And that's the wow experience that your customers saw. And then Matthew, I love that you use the word disenfranchised, right? I think a lot of times customers, especially where AI is used for customer engagement, there are very strong lines that an organization needs to follow because it can sort of, you feel that, you're sort of automating, you're saving cost, you're improving the experience. But at the other end, there's a customer who's dialing zero to somehow get that human connect, that human empathy. Because their problem is much larger than what the AI can sort of solve correctly. So I think it was a wonderful discussion, Matthew, Amit, today. It was a pleasure having both of you. Thank you for taking the time, and looking forward to a very strong partnership in the new year. Once again, my thanks to both of you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting on this talk. I think some great thoughts being exchanged, and always like talking to Matt and you, Raghav. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, same thing for me. I really enjoyed the conversation. It took me to a lot of different places, a lot of different ideas. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to share them.
Great. Awesome. Great. Nice meeting today, and stay in touch.